the competitiveness between the two. The EMS union president says they had all the equipment, they had all the people. A ladder truck in the District of Columbia staffed on all 4 shifts goes off at about $1.5 million. And I'm talking about just salaries. You with me? And when you looked outside the front door of engine 26 truck 15, it was less than a full, I could have thrown a football to that place where Mr. Mills was having his heart attack. So she's urging and begging the brand new recruit firefighter to please come over and help her dad. And he feels like he's gotta get some type of permission instead of ringing the house gone. The engine was gone. The ladder truck officer felt like it wasn't a responsibility until they got dispatched. And as you heard, when it was dispatched, it was 26 blocks away. They got the wrong information. They sent the ambulance unit, the engine company, from 12s to northwest instead of northeast.
Was that a policy within the organization?
Oh heavens, no. Oh heavens, no. Oh heavens, no. I think that was the cover. Let me try something different on you. You tell. Wait a minute. Let me throw this out, and you tell me. This will make sense out of it. I hope. And I didn't mean to be rude if I was.
No, it's just both those examples in the water rescue. If they have a policy in place.
So all of a sudden, the bay door goes up in truck 15. The lieutenant's sound asleep. The medic is cooking, whatever. And instead of the man dying of a heart attack in the parking lot, there's smoke pouring out of every window and opening of the Dollar Tree that was immediately the store that they just come out of. What would have happened? You know what would have really happened in that city? And I was not the chief. Let me give my disclaimer. The chief would have had to pay for a new bay door at engine 26 truck 15Y. They would have drove for it. They would have drove through it rather.
Yeah.
So help me with that. Help me try to understand that.
It's just about doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing, and you gotta show up. You gotta show up. You gotta show up. I'd love to tell you that in all of the information that Bruce and I could recover, that these are the only 2 times the fire department failed so miserably. What do you think? It gets so old. There's so many opportunities to flash stories like this. There's so many things to discuss. The bottom line is, when you're called for help, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need when you're called for help? You grab the phone and someone's on the other end. What do you need to know?
Where to go?
Do you have a problem? What is the problem? Where are you at? What's it time to do when that information is received? It's gotta go. You gotta go. It's a cat in a tree, and around here we do not do cats in the tree. Fair? Let's just say that's the case. Could the fire department show up, hold hands with whoever owns the cat, and say, if you'll get a can of cat food, we'll open it up. Can you do something?
Yep. Yes.
You gotta what?
Show up.
Please.
I don't think anybody in this room
I agree.
feels like they wouldn't walk across the street start helping that guy. I think if you had those people that were in that fire station sitting right here, right now, they would say, I would get up, walk across the street and help that person. And we got a plethora of examples. How do we end up in a situation where we don't walk across the street?
I think unfortunately, the cultural piece, in the daytime when the officer of the company is sound asleep with the door closed, officers have separate bunk rooms in the district, your District of Columbia, our nation's capital. That's the first problem that I would have to identify. I grew up in that system. I went to work there a very, very long time ago, and I worked at the busiest company. We had, on number 3 platoon, we went, during my personal physical time in that building, we went on 20, 25, 30 calls that either came in through the telephone, somebody walked up, and one time, an officer coming to work said, there's a house on fire 2 blocks from here. Again, it was time to go. Somebody's outside waiting for medical help. Time to go. I'll go on and on. And as a private, being a person that would be on watch and be trained in that, which this gentleman was, you ring the house call, you tell them what the problem is, where it's at, and you go. That didn't happen. Holding a brand new recruit accountable, I don't think so. The officer telling him, we're only gonna go when we get dispatched, probably was a critical failure. Did the fire chief allow that? And I can tell you that the outcry was to terminate her immediately, and that did not occur. again, it's worthy of reading the story. If you're really into this kind of stuff, there is a DC Inspector General's report that digs way down, and it sounds like Chief either has saw it or has read it, and it gives you all the stinking details. And it was a horrible day for our business. When I got back to Washington, DC, first of all, when I left there in 1979, I said, please, I know I'm only a private, but when I left, I said, please don't do anything until I get back. And they obliged me. So in 2007, nothing had changed hardly, to say the least. With all that said, the culture of the organization was really strong. And we would, like a roller coaster, go through valleys and peaks, and it's still my fire department. And yes, in fact, I have a tattoo. Wish I had the man's arms, but I have a tattoo. Slipped through the cracks. I think the chief's culpable. I think the lieutenant may have bordered criminal. Now, Mr. Mills, he was 79 years old, if you heard. He'd worked in that government for 47 years. He had a massive amount of medical problems. And he died of a heart attack, which was no shock. If they came over with the best paramedic in the city, with an entire drug box, video laryngoscope, I think they're still there, I hope, Lucas device, you kind of tracked it, went to the very, very best ER there was, what would have been the outcome? 99%.
Irrelevant.
Probably wouldn't have changed.
It was bottoms up, it was a dirt nap, it was, unfortunately, he was gonna die that day.
But that's not relevant.
That's not right.
You never know.
Yeah.
I like this guy. I like that. Yeah, without a doubt, it's irrelevant. None of that part is just nonsense. In fact, if you're a really good paramedic and you get to do a mega code, what should you do afterwards? Get an ice cream cone, do the report and debrief and all the things you've got to get done. But that's a good day being a paramedic, yes or no? And if it's not, you ought to not be a paramedic. Did I say that right? We'll talk a little bit about it later, but when's it fun to be a surgeon? If you're not having a good time when you're doing what you've trained years and years for, find another career. And if you get an opportunity, you're a paramedic. I don't want to keep picking on you. There's several other folks identified as paramedics. You're not there yet, but you're getting there. What's the adrenaline rush look like when you're really needed and you're doing a lot of medical work in the street?
It's part of your job
Probably a little different than picking up the person with bilateral Samsonitis. You ever have those calls here? And you treat them nice and kind and all that, but you know that person needs a ride to the hospital. But as a rule, what my paramedics would say, and I'm not one, I wish I was, if I had to go back over and do it again, I would have been, is that they wanted a young person that had a multi-systems trauma. Why? They want to save the person. They want to use all of their skills. How about a firefighter that says, I hope nobody's house catches on fire tonight, but if there is a nice room and contents, I'm hoping I'm on duty. Yes or no? If you're not of that belief, again, I would say do some career
What do you see
searching.
fit?
Do some career searching.
Chief, I was gonna say,
Yes, please.
one thing that I noticed in those examples is that, and I think every department has this, is the disconnect between public perception of what we can do and the internal realities of what we can do, whether it's policy driven or culture driven. I think we all have those kinds of things where we see this and maybe they had like the water rescue one, maybe they had policies that said you can't do this. And so
I
they're
don't
standing there
think that
like,
they had the
whatever, but
policies. I think that was pseudo, as in like, okay, if you don't give us what we need, and I think the chief paid for that dearly, unfortunately for him. And I don't necessarily disagree. However, when you talk about the public's perception and you go out and you look like Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto, and the lids go flying off of the D50, and you warm up let me guess, it probably was a 3-lead light pack 4, maybe even. When you do all that stuff and you really work hard, you really try to get something done, and the person fails, what's the family say? Oh my God, thank you. What's the highest level of appreciation from a family? I love asking vague questions because it makes you think, what's the high? cookies. Now, if they don't have X-Lax, if they're not bought from the grocery store, which they're usually never, unpack that for me.
They put in the time and effort.
Oh, they put in the time and effort. There's more love in that batch of cookies, and I'm not exaggerating, than you can imagine. That's a really great day to be a fire chief, a fire captain, a firefighter, a paramedic, an EMT, an RV. It's a great day in the system. And if you do your job right, more times than not, what will you get?
Thank you.
Cookies. Why does a guy with that kind of muscles whisper? There's something inherently wrong with him whispering to me. I don't get it.
I think part of the problem with that public perception is what they know is exactly what you said, is Ronnie and Joy. It's got
Well-
the name wrong. But it's what they've learned from watching TV, because that's what they know, and I've ran into that before. Public has a perception of what they see on the TV screen, because they're not.
Do they expect you to save a person that has a medical epidemiology that's as long as their arm? Do they at some point expect
you to do
Mr. Mills-
something.
But I get it, but do they expect him to die at some point?
Right.
He was a very, very sick
Yes.
man. And again, I think instead of trying to figure out a way to file criminal charges against the lieutenant, that would have been my approach. I hate to say it, but it would have been. Because I think she was criminally culpable, humble personal opinion. That Mr. Mills' daughter, instead of standing on the front steps with a picture of him, and his father, where he's a Baptist minister, the story couldn't get any worse. Every time I see it, I get a knot in my stomach, and I had been gone 3 years when that story happened. It's ridiculous. I can't imagine what the chief in California thinks when he sees that swim story. Do something. Did you sign up to kill yourselves? Please say no. Please say no. Please say no.
No.
No. Well, you signed up to help people when? When they need it, when they're hour of need. And you go over and you do great CPR, and again, I left them with video laryngoscopes. Paramedics, does it get any better? I've gotten a couple of real intubations. Don't tell any medical professionals because I'm an EMTP, but when you see that, tell me that isn't like amazing. Tell me that isn't magic. And the Lucas device, don't tell anybody, you'll see EMT on your shirt. Oh, wait a minute, you are a paramedic. I thought we had a confession. No
confessions today.
But when you see the Lucas device and we go from 35% effectiveness to 65% effectiveness of CPR, wow, do your job. I like to talk about management by wandering around, and I won't get too long into this story, but I don't watch a lot of television unless it's sports, it's news, or it's a real life show. I gotta admit, I watched Swamp People last night, and it was amazing. God, those folks are just incredible people. You probably never saw it. You're out on that mountain looking for that longhorn sheep, but they kill those alligators like it's no tomorrow. Unbelievable, brave people. This particular edition, though, and not to belabor the lengthy part of the story because it took a half hour to watch it. I couldn't believe it. It was about 10 minutes worth of information, but ultimately, a person that probably lived in Sisters Camp, Sherman area, was the CEO of a cruise line company, a billionaire. But the local reference was only teasing, but that's where their home office was for my little story. The rest of it's factual. And he visits each part of the ship. He's out doing the cruise with the ship like they do, and he's got on a cheesy wig and a crazy mustache. And as he visits each of the little venues, they do incredible work. And he finally gets to the top deck, the deck where you do all the fun stuff, the swimming pool, etc. This particular ship had a rock climbing wall on the very bow of the ship. I hope that's God calling. That's what they always say at church. and they also had a place where you could do surfing. Are you with me? On a doggone ship. It's 90 degrees. We're in the Caribbean Sea, or if you like, Caribbean Sea. People are surfing. People are climbing the wall. They're ringing the bell. This is a true story, Cap. You just have that sad look on your face. And all of a sudden they do a wave, right? And they're screaming for their counterparts, their spouses or kids. It's just a huge ball. What's going on in the background that the story pointed out when they're having so much fun? I'll take 2 of those drinks with little umbrellas. They're buying keychains with rabbit's foots or surfboards. Are you with me? It's like amazing, and the cash register's rolling. So at the appointed time, at the appointed hour, they shut that down. And the 2 kids operating this, that the man's talking to, they put out a simulated ice skating surface where all this stuff is at. Are you with me? They bring out plywood, and then they put the material that you can skate on that's made out of plastic. 90 degrees, 90% humidity. The ship's rolling and yawing like a ship does. How many folks show up for that attraction? 0. How much beer gets sold or funny drinks with umbrellas?
Probably 0.
0. How many rabbit's foots?
0.
0. So this is the CEO. This is the guy that lives right here in Sisters. I'm teasing about that again, but what kind of revelation does he have? Oh my God, oh my God. Probably back at their headquarters, they're designing a second component of the ship to have another skating area. And he asked the young folks, how come there's no people? And they say, no one ever shows up for this attraction. So until when, management by wandering around is a subtopic, you gotta show up as a topic. At what point did he realize this ain't working? When he showed up, when he showed up, when he showed up, when he showed up. You gotta show up. Now, who likes to be micromanaged? Raise your hand. All right then, I think it's unanimous, or doggone close to being unanimous. With that said, be a cool micromanager. What I like to do, and this is in any phase of our business, but I'm gonna couch it in terms of a response. When I show up and things are going right, man, this is the part I love. I want to be your cheerleader. Captain, you knocked it out of the park. Hey, young man, how many months?
8 months.
8 months. You look like a 20-year veteran knocking that fire down. And I can't believe the tremendous opportunity you gave that person to live. You provided CPR that was incredible, and I could go on for an hour. I become a cheerleader, and I like shaking hands. I really do. I like patting people on the back. When I first went to Washington, D.C., you gotta remember that's a very political city. They said, sir, are you gonna run for mayor? All right.
Are you?
I would like to. I would actually like to go back being the fire chief. So the coolest part of being a micromanager, I'm there, I'm not doing anything but what? Being a cheerleader. Well, every once in a while, I would show up, and it only happened one time in the District of Columbia, a lot more often in Atlanta. So honestly, we had a building, U-shaped building. Before we were done, it went to an 8-alarm fire, and I'm pretty sure I know our history pretty well. I think because 2 buildings are now burning, I think that was the largest amount of units ever responded to a call in the District of Columbia. So they grabbed the number 2 chief, who was incredible, and I said, Chief, if we don't protect this exposure, it was a similar building, again, probably had about 100 to 150 apartment units in it, big U-shaped building, we rescued over 50 people. I said, we're gonna have this second building, little did I know, a church out back would burn from being exposure. And he looked at me and he said, Chief, I can't do it. And I'm thinking, this is my go-to, always can-do guy. He says, do you realize we've had 4, maybe it was 5 Maydays? And he said, as soon as we get those Maydays cleared, I'll start working on that. I said, how about this, Larry? You take care of the Maydays. I got this. So I got 2 engines and a ladder truck, the fire chief. I opened up my own division. We would have been B division. And lo and behold, we stopped the fire from going to the next unit. And I was the person, I was the supervisor of the division. Doesn't happen often in a system that large, except for Atlanta. I can tell you a lot more stories about Atlanta. So what was it absolutely positively necessary for me to do at that moment in time? I'm convinced in my heart.
Kick man.
I would hope you would say be a team member.
Team member.
I fell into being that team member piece because I had to. Didn't look to do it. Atlanta, it would often be a problem with, I think, some aliens. I think there was a lot of aliens in the environment around Atlanta. I would show up at a command post after we'd gone over 1,000 times what the chief officers had to do, and what would I find?
Doing something else?
Yeah, they would be doing something else, and who would be at the command post?
You.
Nobody. So if there's nobody at the command post and you're sure you're at the command post, what should you do? You can drop to the bottom. I would take command. I guess I should have waited to the end to tell that story. But that happened more than once in Atlanta. And do I love taking command? Of course. That's what I live for. It's fun when you're a surgeon to do surgery, and I could go through that regimen. However, there was nobody in command of a pretty significant fire. It was time to take over. Before I get there though, let's talk about being a hot coach. What is a hot coach? That is not Bruce Marner in a Speedo. Whoa. My eyes cannot see. My ears cannot hear.
Is that just not walking past something going wrong?
Not exactly, but yes, almost there. But yes, yes, yes. Keep digging a little bit more. What's a coach?
Somebody gives direction.
A teacher gives direction, very, very much so. And what's the hot piece mean? It's not a Speedo.
It's gotta happen.
While it's occurring. The coolest hot coaching that I can describe is the crash of United 232. Anybody hear that story, the DC-10 in Sioux City, Iowa? Amazing. Happens in July of 1989. Gosh, I can't remember the captain's name. It'll come to me in a minute.
Al Haynes.
Captain Al Haynes is at the command. 37 pieces of shrapnel blows up 3 hydraulic lines that plane can't fly. And as the plane comes in, they're thinking it's going to land, and it doesn't. I mean, it crash lands rather about a quarter of a mile off of the runway. And it's scattered, and it's in pieces. And it's a huge fireball if you've never seen it. So the first command officer that leaves out of the Sioux City Gateway, Iowa Airport screams on the radio. Just does. And you can't make sense out of any of the words. And if I had the clip, which I know I have it in mind, but trust me. Then they make a second transmission, and it only gets worse. And the third time, you can just tell the adrenaline is at 1,000, the blood pressure is off the charts, and then you hear a voice click in. Hey, Orville, what you got going on out there? And clearly the guy talking to Orville was a higher ranking person. You with me? And Orville screams at him. And he says, okay, Orville, you're gonna need a lot of resources out there. 10-4. What I'll do is I'll activate our mass casualty plan. I'll ensure that the hospitals are notified. 10-4, Orville, I'm gonna dispatch the command vehicle and I'll meet you out at the command post. And then Orville's blood pressure is down. It's pretty clear that they're making progress. They're starting to rescue people. There were 196 people aboard that aircraft, and like 110 will survive. High impact crash, it just doesn't happen. It's usually 100% fatal. So absolutely amazing, absolutely incredible, amazing, wonderful, just again, spectacular day. And with all that said, what was Al Haynes? The guy, talking to Orville rather, was the hot coach. Had to happen now. Higher ranking person, what could he have said? Stop yelling, don't be an idiot. Could go on and on with that, yes or no? So Rube is waiting his whole life to become a battalion chief. And when I got to that level, I found myself in training. At least I was a battalion chief. So sad, so sad. Sad little battalion chief. And about 6 years of keeping my nose clean, being a good person, I got to go to the field. So about a week or two of finishing up training with the battalion chief that was going to retire, I'm going to take over the battalion. I am Battalion 4. Smile when I say that. I was Battalion 4. It don't get no better. We go to a house fire. Been waiting forever. And when we get there, driving up, slow down, deep breaths, make a good radio transmission, assume command, call for the working fire dispatch, make sure the utilities are coming. I know I'm gonna need the air unit, make sure that they've got a supply line. Let's focus on an attack line. What are we gonna do with the concerns and issues with extension? Do I have a RIT team? Are you with me? All this goes through my little pea brain. boss shows up. Paul Schroeder's his name. He's got one more toilet plunger on his collar than I do. One more toilet plunger. How about the person with all 5 toilet plungers? Head janitor? Head plumber? Yeah, okay, all right, so working hard for these last folks. And Paul looks at me and he says, Rube, that's my nickname. Did you get it all clear? Wah, wah, wah. Went up to 10 feet, went down to 2 inches. And I thought, okay, now what? Grab the microphone. Had the heavy rescue start the primary search on the first floor. Asked the ladder truck to go to the second floor. Paul never said a word. Beyond that, beyond asking me. Did he really need to beat me up more? Of course, because it was me, probably yes, but in reality, who became the best search and rescue command officer for at least the next 6 months? Whew, whew. Thank God he hot coached me. What could he have done? And this was a painful system to work in. What could he have done? He's not ready, he can't be in the field, he can't be a battalion chief, we've got to replace him, get his ass back to training, or butt back to training rather, sorry. On and on and on. So, hot coach is critical, and we talked about the very, very last thing that causes issues, that people begin to lose faith in themselves is when you have to take over. So I'm telling you, be a micromanager, absolutely, but try to go down this list. When somebody's there cheering you on, even though they're higher ranked, good or bad, am I doing something wrong? Okay, I didn't know. I know it's break time. I'd love to get through this first one, and then we'll take a quick break. If you do this right, you win the minds and you win the hearts of our members. Please write that one down. Why is that important? What can you do with the minds and the hearts of your membership?
More dedication.
What else? Yes.
Ownership.
Yes.
Buy-in.
Yes.
Anything.
Anything. That's what I was hoping to hear. Anything. All of that was 100% correct. Plus, think about what great fire departments do, what great organizations do, what great military units do, because we have their minds and their hearts. A really good leader casts a long shadow. How far is Hawaii from here, Chief? 4,000 from here? Ish.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a 4.5 hour flight.
It's 4.5 hours? Is that all? Oh my gosh. I don't know where I flew out of, but I thought it was closer to 6. That was the 2 meals and the videos. 4 hours, that's kids play. That's the easy one. But with that said, how do you expect this organization to operate when you're 4 hours away by air? How do you expect it to operate?
Exactly the same.
Just like you were sitting in your office, fair? Cast a long shadow. And you know, here's a really cool one, and I stole a lot of this from the chief, big chief, for the scene. You never want to let a good boss down. Good bosses have people that will support them. Good bosses have people that when you miss doing a primary search, which is the reason why we got dispatched in the first place, the guy didn't hug me, he wasn't that type of guy, but he never said another word about it. Since he's retired and I'm out on the road doing stuff, I've talked to him on several occasions. I told him how much I appreciate what he did. So you gotta show up to do that. Good leaders are always curious. What do you think? You gotta figure out what's going on in your systems, whatever that might be. There's so many stories to tell about that, but if you don't figure out what's going on, if you don't investigate issues, you're gonna see a little bit later on in the presentation some of the problems that could pop up. So don't be a stranger. Good leaders are good readers. Why would I say that?
Some more books.
Say what? I do not want to carry them home. I'm just saying.
You should get a free book for that.
Educate themselves.
But nothing changes.
Learning.
And nothing changes, right?
Well, like somebody
Bruce
said,
described
fresh,
the
fresh.
textbook of the 40s that was very Machiavellian.
No.
It's still the same way today, right? All right, he's buying off on that. I don't think so. But you're a paramedic.
Yes, sir.
Nothing has changed in the medical field.
Not that I have.
Nothing has, right? I can remember that when I signed up, boy, we hardly knew about CPR, and when we did it, it was 5 compressions and 2 ventilations, right? and there wasn't a tempo, so that's never changed. We still use mass trousers. Gosh, that's never changed.
Still get Bertillon.
Say, so, I hope what the answers are, is everything's changing and how often?
Right now.
And now more than ever, we kind of speed.